Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Have You Read That Movie, the show in which I talk about books that have been adapted into film. And in today's episode, I am a sick boy. I'm very sick, so I apologize for the delay. I've been getting over a cold now for a couple of days, but it's coming along. So, I mean, if you hear some sniffling and some... I hope that you enjoy this ASMR episode. I hope it blows out your eardrums, everybody. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about 1965's published book. That was a weird thing to say. I don't know why I said it like that. But we're going to talk about Dune, directed, written by Frank Herbert. This book is a renowned classic, and I think a lot of people regard this as one of the greatest science fiction novels ever written, and it's held and remembered extremely well. So we're going to talk about that, as well as 1984. Oh god, I have to look that up again. 84. Yeah, I was correct. Wow. I know more about Dune than you think. I will also be talking about 1984's film, directed by David Lynch. Let's get right into it. Let's talk Frank Herbert's Dune. Okay, without further ado, let me just say one thing. Spoiler warning for this episode in general, and for most episodes of Have You Read That Movie. If you have not read the book or seen the film, you should experience either medium. So if you don't want to be spoiled of anything, if you don't want to know what happens or big plot things, definitely click away from the video. So yeah, let's talk about the book. The original Frank Dune novel. Frank Dune? What the fuck am I talking about? I think sickness has gone to my head and I cannot think anymore. So let's just talk about the book as it is. To explain the plot of this book as a synopsis is really tough, so I'm gonna try my best to explain the plot of this book at the most surface level. If I try to explain everything about this book, it's going to actually assault your brain with too much information, and it's just too much explanation, and this video could easily be like an hour long, just dedicated to the synopsis of this book. So to keep it really condensed and simple, it's about House Atreides. They are like a ruling house family in the galaxy, and there's also the House Harkonnen, and there's the Emperor. And the Emperor and the Harkonnens want to work together to take down House Atreides because House Atreides has been getting more popular. And right now the Harkonnens have in control of a lot of the production of this thing called the spice melange, which the spice is like this substance that is mined on a planet called Arrakis, also known as Dune, which titled the book. Oh wow, what the fuck. So the Harkonnens and the Emperor team together to concoct a plan to trick the House Atreides and to pretty much attack and assault them. So they have an insider at the House Atreides, and so to betray them. The Atreides are given the planet Arrakis. This planet is extremely deadly. There's sandworms, there's terrible storms, water is like a commodity and pretty much like the way of life for them because there's so little of it. They have to use like these suits that preserves your own body water. You'll just die from dehydration in like no time. The family is betrayed. The Duke Leto has been murdered. And also failed an assassination attempt against the Baron Harkonnen. Paul and his mother Jessica are thrown into the desert and escape, kills 2 guards, and runs away into the desert. The Baron hears like some things about, oh, they're probably dead. He's so cocky and arrogant that he just thinks they're dead. It's okay. I've defeated all of House Atreides. Paul and his mother are in the desert. They meet the Fremen people, and the Fremen are like inhabitants of the planet. They welcome Paul and Jessica somewhat to their tribe, but the only means to do that is if Paul beats one of their strongest tribal members in a knife fight. And of course Paul wins, and then he is allowed to stay with the Fremen people. But there is also a prophecy that's been going around from the Fremen people about a savior, a Bene Gesserit mother, which I'm not going to get into Bene Gesserits and shit like that, because again, a lot of backstory. But a Bene Gesserit woman and her son will lead the Fremen people to victory and to conquest and to this promised land, essentially. Paul essentially gains the trust of the Fremen people. He gets married, has a kid. Paul's mom actually gives birth to a daughter in which she didn't know she was pregnant with the Duke's daughter. She also drank this thing called the life water. So the consciousness of the Reverend Mother goes into the consciousness of her baby, and it really messes her up and turns her daughter into like something very inhuman-like and extremely creepy, and a lot of people call her child a demon. Paul names his kid after his father, Duke Leto II. They're attacked by Harkonnen and Sardaukar soldiers, who are the Sardaukar soldiers are the Emperor's soldiers, essentially. During the attack, they killed Leto II, which is Paul's son, and then they've also taken his sister into captivity. Paul then reacts, rightfully so, by taking the armies of the Fremen and telling them to rise up, and pretty much leads an army to attack the Harkonnen and the Sardaukar soldiers. They attack, they win, the Baron Harkonnen's killed, the Emperor has to step down, and essentially Paul becomes the new Emperor. So it's a fairly easy story of just powerful houses against each other, moral rivals, and then, just a lot of political things. And that's kind of really what Dune's about. It's like more of a political sci-fi book than it really is a science fiction novel. The sci-fi elements are all still there. You got giant monsters, you've got very science fiction-y like ideals and themes and topics. But I'm gonna kind of go through what I like about the book and what I don't like about the book. But first, I guess I should talk about what I didn't like about the book, because there's a lot more I liked about the book than vice versa. So let's talk about the things I didn't like first. So first things first, this book is really, really dense. It's a pretty dense read. There's a lot that you could take. I mean, this is a big book. I mean, my version doesn't look nearly as big as others, but it's also much taller. What I really noticed is that I didn't understand anything that was going on for like the first 30 pages. And that's because in the back of the book, there is a dictionary. And without this little tassel here that you see, this little ribbon, if that did not exist on this book, I would be screwed, because the book pretty much wants you to flip back and forth from the, dictionary index back to the beginning, back to your page in the book, and then just pick up from where it is. For me, that was really obnoxious. I didn't know that it existed because you have to flip through the end of the book. I'm not going to flip through the end. I don't want to accidentally read something and get spoiled. So of course I didn't do that. But somebody at my job had to tell me. And when I was told that, I was like, well, that's really stupid and extremely inconvenient. And also it really breaks up the pacing of the book. Like, I feel like I wanted to really get into reading this book a lot more. And I felt like there was just a lot of problems with like having to flip all the time through the book, just hoping to understand what the hell was going on. It's so obnoxious. I would have rather of them just explain it in the book. It would have made more sense, and it probably would have been a lot easier. So that was just kind of one little complaint I had. I mean, after a while, I got used to it, and I kind of knew what was going on, so I didn't really need to rely on the back half of the book towards the later ends of the book and the aspect of it, because it was just, I was able to follow it pretty easily. Internal monologues. I'm not against internal monologues in books. I actually think it's really interesting because it kind of gives us an insight on characters and what they're thinking and what they're feeling in the moment, and I'm okay with that. But holy Jesus, there was something about hearing it consistently from every single character, especially during big moments and exciting moments that should be really, again, exciting. It made it really boring and kind of dull, and also really took me out of the moment because I was just like, I don't care what you're thinking. And a lot of the times there were monologues that didn't really add up to anything or didn't, add anything contextually to what was happening. I kind of already understood what the character was probably feeling in that moment. And then it was just reassured by that overall thought thinking. And it was just pointing out things that I already knew what were happening. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks. It just kind of didn't feel necessary. So that was something that I thought was kind of annoying, but I got over it. But at the same time, I was like, it's still not great. Let's just talk about tropes in general. There's a lot of tropes in science fiction and fantasy, and Dune is no different. Now, I will admit, this book came out in 1965. I think I can have some leeway with this, but I still think it's a criticism regardless, because I understand that this book came out at a time probably when this trope, specifically this trope, might have not been as commonplace, but it definitely is something that we've seen done to death. It's something that we've experienced so much, and I just feel like I need to talk about it. So let's talk about the prophecy. Anything that involves the prophecy, which is the foretold thing of, oh, you know, the hero there will be somebody that rises up and all this other stuff. I don't care for it. I don't care for the prophecy or chosen one stuff. Harry Potter does it, and I didn't care for it much in Harry Potter. I'm not big into the chosen one prophecy foretold stuff because it just kind of deflates the conflict in and of itself, because you know the character will be fine because the prophecy foretold it. Unless you're doing a twist on the prophecy being, oh, these people are a bunch of jokes and then the prophecy is actually BS, then I could be like, okay, that twisted the expectation of what I was expecting, you know? But a lot of the times in these books, they're always like, oh yeah, whatever the prophecy is, that's what it is. And I kind of sat there and just went, okay, but there's no tension, there's no suspense, there's no excitement about anything that's going to happen to this character. We know Paul's going to be okay. We know he's the prophecy foretold because they say a Bene Gesserit mother and her son are gonna meet with the Fremen people and lead them to the promised land. You know that it's going to be Paul, and you know that's Lady Jessica, because they're the only ones that we've met that are a Bene Gesserit and a son. It's the only thing. They're the only characters. There's no, it might be this other person, or maybe it's somebody else. But when they say it's somebody else, it's like, no, it's clearly them, because they're the only characters in here that fit that description. And so you know it's gonna happen. And when it does, I was not shocked. I was like, yeah, it's about what I expected. It just deflates the excitement of things, because you know they're not gonna die. You know that it's not going, you know, that there's no stakes at hand, because you know exactly who they are, what they are, and that everything's gonna be fine because the prophecy told us that everything's gonna be okay. So I don't know, that's just me personally. That's just prophecies in general. So take that with a grain of salt, but that's just my feelings about that. Paul's kind of a little bit of a boring character. There's nothing much about him. He's kind of a blank slate. He's just supposed to be a character that you're supposed to just put yourself into Paul's shoes, essentially. The only really big thing about his character is that he's obviously, he's got a lot of shoes to fill, because his father was such a well-respected and beloved person, and to fulfill not only the House Atreides rules and what, you know, his father was, but also at a young age, he had to step up into his father's role and position, and those were some big shoes to fill. That's really all his character is, but it's not really explored super deep. Most of the stuff with like the Fremen people is just kind of simple. It's very simplistic. So I don't know. Personally, I found Paul to be kind of the most boring character out of the series, for sure. I don't know why I said series. I mean, sorry, Dune is a series, might I add. This had 6 books, but I haven't read the other books, and this is not a series. This is just the first book, so sorry about that. Let's talk about the good. There's probably a lot more good. I can't really think of anything else that was bad about this book. You know, this was a book that did take me a while to read. This was a 2-week period of me just reading this thing, because this is a really, really dense read. But I got a lot out of it. I think taking my time with this book was my saving grace. And I highly recommend that other people do that too. Take your time with this. Don't rush it. It's something you just have to really set some time aside and just really get through it, and don't speed read it, because you get so much more out of it when you take your time with it. You'll experience a lot more to enjoy, and you'll probably get a lot more out of it. So let's talk about the things I really liked about this book. The world. The universe itself of Dune is extremely well crafted and super rich. Frank Herbert is an amazing writer. He knows how to contextualize things. He knows how to pretty much present everything in such a way that you really understand what's happening. Like, you have to like figure things out, but at the same time, it's so contextual and deep and really, really like thought through. Everything is super thought through. You know, again, like I was saying, I really like these suits that they have to wear to maintain their body water and moisture. Like, because Dune is such a barren wasteland where there's no rain at all. You know, that's so important, and that was such a huge deal in this book. And I really like that aspect, and I think it makes the book really interesting. It also just kind of like adds world building element to it of what do they do to maintain their body water, because if not, they'll just die of dehydration. And whatever water there is, it's so limited. You know, it's so vital to these people. Also, I really like the planet of Arrakis is really, really interesting and is its own character, and I really like that. I think that Frank Herbert did a really great job at making us understand what the harsh conditions were like, putting us in the position and understanding of what this planet is like, especially when you got these giant sandworms pretty much throughout the desert. It is scary. There are a lot of moments where you're like, anything can happen, and that was really, really exciting to read, because you were just wondering what crazy shit was going to happen, because this planet is so erratic and over the top. You know, it could be deadly sandstorms or this extreme change in weather in general. It's so fascinating, and I love that. You know, I love like the culture of the Fremen people. They have like their own culture and society, and they react to things. I really like that. The politics of this book are extremely well thought through and extremely interesting, and I love pretty much most of anything involving that. It was really, really cool and fascinating. The Baron Harkonnen and the Harkonnen family in general, really fucking awful people, which makes them really fucking compelling villains, and I really like that. They were so terrible, disgusting, vile, just the worst. They are so awful, and I loved every second of that. I love when stories are able to make you hate a character so much, and I was all about it. I couldn't even begin to describe or tell you why the Baron is so great. He is such a vile character. He's actually in the book, he's a pedophile. He talks about having sex with young boys, and he likes them nice and sweet, and I fucking shivered. That made me just, ugh. I hated it. I hated him. He was horrible. He would fucking kill people for no reason. He was a goddamn vile, atrocious being. He manipulated so many people. Again, he was a great villain. He was cunning, conniving, evil, and so meticulous. I really liked the Baron Harkonnen and any of the Harkonnen, like, anytime the book cut to the Harkonnens, I was like, what fucked up shit am I gonna read this time? It was really good. He was awesome to read about. And even Fade, his nephew, who has tried to commit assassinations against his uncle, which I was actually kind of like, well, that's interesting, because he wants to win the power dynamic in the family. So even the Harkonnens are awful towards each other, which I thought was really interesting. Okay, so the Kwisatz Haderach stuff. Let's talk about that. I didn't really discuss about the Kwisatz Haderach. Paul essentially becomes the Kwisatz Haderach, which is because of the Bene Gesserit training he's gotten from his mother, the Mentat training he's gotten from his father, and he was also taking in all the spice, because the spice is on a planet that's just in the air. It's everywhere you are on Arrakis, and it changes Paul to this other being in which he could see time like a river, where he doesn't know whether he's in the past, the present, or the future. And I thought that was so cool. I don't know why I like that. It was so interesting. It was a really, for one, a great, metaphor or simile, I guess, to use, where time is like a river, and essentially to not be able to understand or perceive what was really fascinating, and I like that. Also, it made all that stuff with Paul really interesting, and I love like the flash forwards of him being like this leader bathed in blood, and all these things, and it was like, is that me? Am I going to become this? And it's so fascinating, and I think that was like some of the elements that made Paul more interesting, was all the things that he's going to accomplish later in his life and what kind of a leader he's going to be. I think those were really, really interesting. Personally, those were like the only elements, but I still have to put it in positives because I thought it was really cool. The writing is extremely detailed and thought through, and everything has a purpose, has a meaning, and it just makes sense. When you're reading this book, it just feels good just to read it. It just flows well, it naturally progresses, and it gives you all these backstories and all these things, and you're just constantly interested in what's going on. And I really found myself invested in this story, and I think it's a really fantastic read, and I do recommend this book. I think this is an awesome book, And if you haven't checked it out, please, 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 please read it. I've been told by many people to read this book, and I finally did it, and I really don't regret it. I wouldn't say this is the greatest science fiction novel ever made. I know a lot of people love to put this book on a big pedestal. They love to say it's like the greatest thing ever. And I can kind of understand that to an extent. I think it's a good book. I think it's a really well thought through book. I think it's a really interesting book. I wouldn't go as far as to say it was like the greatest science fiction novel ever made, because there are things that are dated. There's things I still have issues with. But overall, I mean, I'd still say it's still worth reading, and I think it still stands the test of time. There are a lot of great things about this book, and I think makes it really interesting. And I mean, without this book, we wouldn't have things like Star Wars or Game of Thrones. This book was highly influential in a lot of our pop culture and media. I do hope that people do read this and check it out, because I think it's really worth it. I think it's a really fascinating book, and I think there is still enough to it that you'll enjoy it. It is a very complex and an extremely challenging read, so take that with a grain of salt, that you have to understand what you're getting yourself into, and it might not be the most exciting read, but it'll definitely be maybe something that might tickle your fancy, especially if you're a sci-fi junkie. This is definitely a book for sci-fi veterans. Do not pick this up as like your first sci-fi read. Trust me, you will not have a good time, and I think you'll be extremely lost, and it could potentially turn you off from science fiction, and I don't think this is a great way to start it. But please, 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 please check this book out. I think it's worth it. Okay, now we're going to talk about David Lynch's Dune. Where do I even begin with this movie? Oh, I know. This movie fucking sucks. Yeah, this movie is, it's really fucking bad. I just don't understand this movie and what the fuck it was doing. Because David Lynch is a great director. Don't get me wrong. I think Eraserhead's fantastic. I love Mulholland Drive. Whenever I think of Mulholland Drive, just think of the color blue. So that's probably why I wanted to call it Blue Mulholland. But also, you made a movie called Blue Velvet, which I have not seen, but I want to. I really want to see David Lynch's Blue Velvet. But, you know, so he's a really competent director. I think he's made a lot of great films, and he's well respected and regarded in the film community. But this was a movie in which there's a lot of history behind the film of Dune. So let me just kind of talk a little bit about it. Originally, Dune was supposed to be directed by Alejandro Jodorowsky, but the movie became this big, inflated, budgeted movie where there was just too much money being thrown at it. Salvador Dali was asking for unreasonable amounts of money for every minute he was on screen or for every minute he was on set. And then that inflated the budget. The special effects were really daunting, and there was a lot of things about this movie that were just building and adding up. You had the likeness of H.R. Giger doing the design and the works of this film. And I thought it was really fascinating. And you can watch all of this in an amazing documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune, which I highly recommend. And I think you should totally look up into it. I own it on Blu-ray. It's wonderful. It's a really great movie that just gives you an insight about what the Dune film originally was supposed to be. But my favorite part of that documentary is when he talks about seeing David Lynch's Dune and what his reaction was. And this is what it was.
I suffer because it was my dream. Another person will do that maybe better than me. I say I will not go to see that because I will die. And my sons say, no, we are warriors, you need to come and to see that. Even I think I will cry and start to see the picture go step by step, step by step, step by step. I became happy because the picture was awful.
So with that being said, what about this movie is bad? Well, there's a lot of things that make this film bad. For the fact of the matter, this was the film that made David Lynch not ever want to make another studio film ever again, because the production behind it was so bad, and it's infamously bad. Yeah, but let's talk about the things I like about the film first, which there are things I liked about it, but not a lot. There's not a whole lot, guys. I mean, I'm gonna be real. It's not good. So, what did I like about the film? Well, I think it's competently shot. It's not ugly to look at. Well, I'm gonna come back to that one because it's gonna bite me in the ass if I say that. It's competently shot. There are some effects, not all, some that are pretty decent. most of the practical effects are pretty good. Like I'll make an example. I like the part when the sandworm is attacking the mine, and there's this great shot of like the sandworm rising out from underneath it, and it like takes this miniature and it blows it up. It's really cool. It looks great, and honestly, I think it's a really cool scene in the film. So personally, I was like, okay, that looks good. I mean, it gives you a good idea of the size and scope of things. You know, there's competency in the film, unlike just filmmaking techniques. But not all special effects are good in this film. So, and we'll talk about that in the negatives. I also like Kyle MacLachlan as Paul. I think he's a really good actor. I think most of the actors are good. Not all of them. I'm gonna come back to that too in the negative. But most of the actors are pretty solid, and I like most of their performances. They're pretty good overall. You know, again, this is Kyle MacLachlan's like first film, and then he would go on to do Twin Peaks with David Lynch, which he's really good in that. So I highly recommend Twin Peaks. Yeah. I can't think of anything else I like about this movie. God, Jesus. There's not a whole lot, is there? Oh, the score. I really like the score by Brian Eno and Toto. Extremely well done. Oh, wait, is it Toto or is it Tangerine Dream? I'm gonna fuck this one up.
Dune's music was composed by Brian Eno, Toto, Daniel Lanois, and others.
Okay, so it was Toto. Hey, gonna take a lot to drag me away from you. The score by Brian Eno and Toto are extremely good, and I think are really, really good, amazing set-piece scores. I listen to the soundtrack quite often, actually, and I like to listen to it when I'm just kind of lazying around and just kind of reading sci-fi. You know, it's just that kind of score that works really well. So I do recommend the score, so actually check it out. Honestly, it's probably the best thing to check out that's related to this film. Yeah, that about covers it. I'm not going to really talk much about anything else other than the things I hated, which is 95% of this movie. So let's get into it. This film was chopped down a lot. I think the original cut of this film was, I think, like 3 hours long. I know David Lynch said that there was a lot chopped out of this film. And the big problem with this movie is the one great thing that everybody loves about most bad films: studio interference. Yeah, this had a lot of studio interference. And of course, when you have studio interference, you know it's just a good fucking time for these wonderful auteurs who just want to make beautiful films, but are fucked because of their goddamn greedy asshole business partners. Isn't it great? Isn't it great when a studio just likes to jam their fucking fist down your throat and tell you to do it their way or else you're fired, and they're the only reason why you're getting any money whatsoever, so you just have to bend to their own will? Isn't that great? Doesn't that make you want to make a movie? Yeah. So really the big thing about the film is what makes it so fascinating is it's just bizarre. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. There's so much shit in this movie that doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, I was talking about the world building a lot, and I just have to tell you that there's so much weird shit in this movie that is just non-existent in the book. Pretty much anything with the Harkonnens. Let's talk about the Harkonnens, because that's one of my favorite aspects of the book. The Harkonnens are fucking shit in this movie. For one, horrifically adapted. The Baron Harkonnen in the movie is this over-the-top, goofy, hamming it up fucking actor whom I don't know why he was as cartoonish as he was. He also has like all these zits and fucking pimples all over his face, and they're like medically proceduring like them cutting it open. It's disgusting. It's like, ugh, what the fuck is this?
The Duke will die before these eyes, and he'll know that it is I, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, who encompasses his doom.
He's such a hammy, cartoonish villain, and then he flies up in the air like some fucking jackass. In the book, he wore a suit that was like supposed to like alleviate weight off of his body, so because he was a fat man, but you know, it was like a suit that was just to help him stand up and just walk. It didn't fucking levitate him and throw him in the fucking air like a goddamn cartoon and like laugh like a fucking jack off. It's so bizarre. Also, like, what the fuck is up with the fucking dudes with the weird eyelid shut thing? Like, what the fuck is that? And then there's like this part where like the Baron walks over to this boy, grabs his face, and then just rips something out of his chest. What the fuck was that? Like, it's not in the book. None of this is in the book, and it doesn't make any fucking sense to what it is. It's just disgusting. And he like puts like this black fucking oil goo on himself, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? What, this whole scene is so fucking awful. It's so well done in the book, and this scene in particular is so fucking bad and doesn't even represent what the book did. So I just begged the question, what the fuck is this? And that's like 95% of the problems. Also, Fade in the book was like really young, cocky, arrogant, and full of himself, but he was also a strong fighter, and Sting plays him. Motherfucking Sting. And boy, can I just talk about Sting other than the goddamn Speedo scene, because what the fuck was that? I didn't want to see Sting in a Speedo at all. That was weird. Didn't make any fucking sense, but yeah, that was the thing. He's just as fucking hammy as the guy that plays as the Baron. The Baron Harkonnen is already a fucking comical joke. Then he doesn't really say much, but he makes a lot of weird faces. And then he literally, the one time he talks, which is during the knife fight with Paul, he does like a fucking Michael Shannon from Man of Steel of, I will kill him! I will kill him! So fucking goofy and stupid and silly. He's so bad. Sting is not an actor. Sting is a singer. He's a musician. Every breath you take, every move you make. I'm just wondering what the fuck you're doing. That was my police reference. I hope you all enjoyed that. Wow, Sting references in 2019, everybody. I hope you fucking hate your life. Also, gonna go back to this knife fight. What the fuck is up with the scene where Paul beats Fade and then he just Fusro-das the shit out of Fade's dead body? That fucking never happened in the book, and it didn't make any fucking sense here. And I was just like, what? Like, what is this shit? Also, Paul, for some reason, can control weather. At the end of the film, it rains. What? Are you fucking serious? That never happens. I don't understand. How is that even possible? He's not God. He's not a fucking Jesus character. He's not, like, able to just fucking change the weather. That's not what the Kwisatz Haderach is. He's not Jesus, so why the fuck is it raining at the end of the movie? It just doesn't make any goddamn sense. Let's talk about that bad CG that we're gonna talk about. You know, so when I was saying about some of the special effects are pretty good, like some of the matte paintings are pretty good, some of the practical stuff are pretty good. Overall, like, you know, like even in the beginning, I know people like to make fun of in most reviews of the Dune film, these fucking alien things in the beginning, which I still don't fucking understand what. It just, I'm not even gonna get into those things, but I'll guarantee you this. Different in the book. Those aliens, like as an alien design, are actually not terrible. Also, it doesn't look bad. It doesn't look terrible. But when you get towards the end of the movie and then you see all this shit, it looks so fucking awful. And then you have like some, also the sandworm riding scene looks so fucking bad. It looks really dated and not great. And then you also have the scene where, the shield scene. All right, we'll talk about that. Patrick Stewart plays as like this like general character in the book. There's this guy who pretty much teaches Paul how to fight and be like a strong soldier so that he can lead his people into war and combat and stuff like that. And he tries to teach him how to do it like a knife fight, but with these shields on. And these shields look bad in the movie. They look fucking awful. And it's just astounding. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, holy shit. This is bad for 1984 standards. Like, there were a lot of critics that said that these special effects were amateurish. And even now, they look so fucking bad. So, yeah, no, it looks bad. It's just bad. You know, especially by the end, you get some really bad special effects. You get a lot of just really wonky shit, and it just... Yeah, no, it's not good. It's a really boring fucking movie. It's super fucking boring. And it's hard to follow, because I'll just put it in perspective. I saw the film first before I read the book. I saw this film about 2 years ago, and I remember just sitting there constantly confused because the first half of the film is an exposition dump. For 5 minutes, the film just expo dumps you. So you're trying to figure things out, but it's so much information being thrown at you that if you just lose track of it, you're just lost, and it just doesn't make any fucking sense. Unless you've read the book, it actually makes somewhat more sense, but it still sucks because it's just a big fucking exposition dump for the first beginning of the film. And I hated it. It was awful. It's really hard to follow if you haven't read the book. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's just too much information being thrown at your face for such a short period of time, and it's so awful and obnoxious. I do admire what David Lynch was trying to do, and I admire the people that tried to make this movie and tried to make it work, but at the end of the day, this movie is just not good. It's just really bad. It's a bad representation and adaptation of the book. Remember the part in the book where the mentat of the Duke Leto is taken by the Baron Harkonnen because his mentat died? And so he puts a poison in his stomach, and then he'll give him an antidote, but the antidote is done through cat milk. And this poor cat's put on a weird contraption where it's being milked, and it looks like it's actually this cat's suffering for this movie. Remember that in the book? It doesn't happen in the book. Yeah, no, there's a lot of things that I just don't get it. I just don't understand this movie. And if you like this movie, who hurt you? I don't understand. I just don't get it. I am looking forward to the 2020 Denis Villeneuve remake of this film. I'm actually really excited because Denis Villeneuve actually is a great director. Well, not to say that David Lynch wasn't a great director, but I'm hopeful that Denis Villeneuve will actually do the book justice. And the film is going to be split into 2 parts, which is fantastic because it'll make up for a lot of the things that this film cut out. And maybe it'll make it a more cohesive story. And I hope it does justice to fans of the book. And including myself, I just want to see a good Dune adaptation. So I'm really excited about the film. I hope it's really good. I hope I come out of it really enjoying it. And I'm very hopeful. So 2020, Dune's getting a remake by Denis Villeneuve. And let's just hope it doesn't get the same treatment that the original 1984 film got. Because, man, it was a box office bomb. It is so bad, and I just remember just hearing so many awful things about this movie. So, but go read the book. I highly recommend it. I'm gonna give the book an overall rating of an 8 out of 10. It's really good. I think it's a really entertaining read, and I think you should absolutely read it. I understand why it's a classic, and I think it's a really good book. I will give the Dune 1984 film a 3 out of 10. It's very bad. It's such a fucking bad movie. It's so boring, it's so dull, and it just doesn't have what makes the book so good. It just works really well as a novel. I swear to God, I just hope that someday, one day, it'll be good. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and feel free to check in for the next episode, which whenever the fuck that's gonna come out, but I'm hoping I'll do another episode within this month, because I'd like to talk about a book for spooky season. I'd like to get a couple of books in. For the next episode, we will be discussing why John dies at the end. Till then, we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. I almost forgot. If you like this video, feel free to leave a like. Feel free to leave a comment. Also, feel free to watch my other videos on my channel. I'm going to put them all right here, right now, over my face. Oh, look at that. There's a couple of videos you could check out. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, fellow fuckers. I don't know. I just called my fans fuckers, but here we are. Have a good one. Whee! Okay, I'm done. Okay, I gotta get the fuck off here. Oh, Jesus. This is how fucking everybody dies.